Hello listeners, Jordan here. I just want to let you know that you can listen to Nighttime early and ad-free on Amazon Music. Include it with Prime.
You are listening to the Nighttime Podcast.
On the afternoon of Sunday, February 25th, 2025, a horrific thing happened in downtown Halifax. At a busy bus stop and just steps from a major downtown shopping center, a 6-year-old boy was stabbed multiple times in a brutal, unexpected, and seemingly random attack. As the boy was being rushed to hospital, police were arresting the unassuming perpetrator, a petite 19-year-old woman named Elliott Chorny. It's a case that's as troubling as it is complicated. On the surface, it's a random, unprovoked attempt at society's most serious crime. But when you dig a bit deeper, just below the surface, it's a story about mental illness, the system that failed the victim and the perpetrator, and the warning signs that went ignored for nearly a decade. Tonight, Madelayne Klein and I are going to use publicly available documents, media reports, Elliott's mother's statements, and even Elliott's own words to try and understand what happened, why it happened, and whether this tragedy could have been prevented. So let's get started here. Tonight, in this episode of Nighttime, we're going to ask the question, who is Elliott Chorny? And why did she do that?
A 6-year-old child is in hospital after they were stabbed multiple times in downtown Halifax. The child was rushed by ambulance to the IWK Health Center with life-threatening injuries. The suspect, a 19-year-old woman, was apprehended at the scene. Police don't believe the victim and the suspect are known to each other.
Ms. Madelayne Klein, I apologize if I seem off tonight. I got a new phone. So excited.
You're just floating over there.
It's my first new phone in ages, and I decided to go with the one with the bigger screen, because there was a time when, my phone I used for phone stuff, but now it's basically my YouTube and video game machine, so I might as well get the one with the big screen.
Isn't it kind of like having a tablet?
It's not that big. It's just like having a slightly larger phone. Or a slightly smaller hand, I guess. But regardless, all that to say, the amount of logging in and things being in other spots than you're used to, it's just it's made my day a whirlwind. But I'm ready to sit down and focus because we have a story that it's fresh and it's causing a lot of discussion in Nova Scotia and beyond. And it's something that I've just been following so closely since it's occurred just last week. It's another case of something horrific and horrible happening very close to home here in Halifax.
I'm just, now that you say that, it's a little alarming how many really bad things happen in your neck of the woods.
Mm-hmm. Well, I live in Halifax, which is the largest city on east of Montreal, I guess, I think. My geography's not great, so I'm reluctant to say that. But
someone will correct you, don't worry.
Yeah, Halifax is a large and growing city, and it's more than its fair share of social problems. But the story we're going to be discussing tonight is a lot like other stories we've discussed in the past. I'm thinking specifically of the episodes we did about random attacks on the TTC, the Toronto Transit Commission, the Toronto buses and subways. This story that we're going to be discussing that occurred in Halifax just last week sounds a lot like the type of stories we discussed during our episode on the TTC.
As horrific as it is, it's unfortunately not an isolated event.
Mm-hmm. It's not an uncommon event. It seems and we'll get into how common it is and the public perception and discourse that surrounds mental health, mental illness, motivated or stimulated or agitated violent attacks on other people. We've seen it multiple times, and again in the episodes about the TTC. I did a 2 or 3 part series about Rohini Bisasar, which was a woman in Toronto who she's known for committing what they call the Path stabbing, which the Path is an underground kind of shopping district and network of tunnels under Toronto. And Rohini Bisasar just kind of roamed around in a state of semi-homelessness before one day she took a knife and walked into a Shoppers Drug Mart and randomly stabbed someone to death. She eventually went on to be found not criminally responsible for the attack, which in Canada is when you're found to not have been understanding what you're doing to the point that you can't be found criminally responsible for it. That'll come up a lot in our discussion tonight, but
we will get into it. But they changed it from not guilty by reason of insanity to not criminally responsible.
That's a good way
because,
to put it.
they're guilty. They did it, but they weren't in the right state of mind. So
yeah, and it's very controversial. That whole idea, as you'll hear, when we get going here, I'm going to read some social media posts people made about the case we'll be discussing today. And I will tell you, if there's any doubt that there is stigma surrounding mental illness in Canada in the year 2025, that doubt will be buried deep underground when we read some of the posts of the reaction to this story. But let's start right from the beginning, because we haven't yet introduced the story of Elliott Chorny and what she did in Halifax on the 25th of February. Rather than starting it myself, I'm going to play a short clip, which is one of the earliest news reports that tell the story of a mid-afternoon stabbing that occurred on Sunday, the 25th of February in Halifax, Nova Scotia. A stabbing that's especially horrific because it involves the victim, a 6-year-old boy. Here's the clip.
A 6-year-old child is in hospital after they were stabbed multiple times in downtown Halifax. Police responded to the 1900 block of Barrington Street at around 12 p.m. Sunday afternoon. The child was rushed by ambulance to the IWK Health Center with life-threatening injuries. The suspect, a 19-year-old woman, was apprehended at the scene and charged with aggravated assault. Police don't believe the victim and the suspect are known to each other. Officials are urging anyone with information or video from the area to come forward.
So what we just heard there is, again, like the earliest reports. That's when the news first comes out. Of course, discussion online kicks off immediately when you hear of a 19-year-old stabbing a 6-year-old. It's, stabbings aren't completely uncommon in Halifax, but a 6-year-old victim certainly is. The news clip, as we just heard, it doesn't give any indication of motive, no real background other than the fact that it happened. It gave an address, the 1900 block of Barrington Street, which in Halifax is like the heart of downtown.
Okay.
It's right outside of a large mall, and it's home to, I don't know if it's actually a bus station or just a series of busy bus stops. So this is an area where there's a lot of people moving around. But for something like this to happen at 1 p.m. on a Sunday, it really makes you ask questions. Is it a parent attacking their kid or an older sibling attacking a kid, or is this like a terrorist thing? Because we've heard stuff like that.
Oh, and it unfortunately happens all the time. Maybe not to such a young child, but yeah, violence is not uncommon by any means.
No. And in Halifax, I say we're a growing city with a lot of social problems. Many of those social problems involve homelessness, drug addiction, substance abuse, and that happens in the downtown core. I'll probably say this more than once in this episode, but a lot of people will have this vision of like insane asylums or like mental homes. Bus stops downtown are modern day insane asylums and mental homes, sadly.
Yes.
I think in this story, you will see that plain as day. In the clip we had just listened to, the early report, it really doesn't give much information about how the attack occurred, who was there, who stopped it, what condition the kid was in. News would slowly come out that the kid was in critical condition or intensive care with life-threatening injuries, which is very serious, of course. But we don't know a lot about the motivation or the attacker. But the next day, we're going to learn more, and we'll learn that one of the few people on the scene, despite it being a busy kind of bus station and mall area, there weren't a lot of people there. One of the people there was actually a bus driver. Listen to this clip from the next morning.
The president of the union representing the city's transit workers says a bus driver witnessed the attack.
The driver, once it set in, was quite shaken by the entire turn of events, as anybody would witnessing something like that.
Police say the suspect is 19-year-old Elliott Chorny. She appeared in Halifax court on Monday afternoon to face charges of attempted murder and possession of a dangerous weapon. Police say the suspect and child were not known to each other. making this a random incident. Police say the woman accused was charged in a separate incident last month.
Back in January, the accused in this matter was charged with assault, but that matters before the courts, so I would not be able to speak to it any further.
Police declined to say if drugs or alcohol were involved and say there's no evidence to suggest the attack was a hate crime.
Some more is revealed here. It's all but determined or stated by police that this was a random attack, which completely changes, the discussion that surrounds this. And also revealed, and worth noting, is that the suspect is a 19-year-old female named Elliott Chorny, who is facing assault charges related to an incident just like 2 months earlier, back in January.
It's such an unfortunate event, but just the fact that the attacker, Elliott, and this 6-year-old boy weren't known to each other, that right there, people need to get their thinking caps on and realize that, and I know there are exceptions to most rules, but like, this was a random attack on a 6-year-old that this person didn't know at all. There are big flashing red arrows pointing to mental health.
Mm-hmm. From the very beginning, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I understand there are evil people out there, but like, let's use logic here.
Yeah, but I think from the beginning, and we'll reveal more as the discussion goes, but from the beginning at this point, I think most people would suspect either like addiction or mental health are involved, because there's no sane reason or logical reason for a 19-year-old to attack a 6-year-old seemingly at random at a bus stop and remain on the scene. Like, Elliott Chorny was arrested on the scene while being held down by one of the kid's parents, as we'll learn a little bit later. We'll learn more about that. But people were quick to
grab their pitchforks.
And a lot of people have not let go of their pitchforks.
No.
And one of them, and I'll point a finger squarely at the Premier of Nova Scotia, Tim Houston is his name. Shortly after, the police released a press release all over social media and everywhere else, where they explained that a 19-year-old female named Elliott Chorny was arrested in relation to a brutal and violent and almost homicidal attack on a 6-year-old. The Premier of Nova Scotia, Tim Houston, shared the Halifax police post and added his own words to it. I'll read them to you. He says, "I struggle to fully express my outrage and sadness at learning about the attack on an innocent child in Halifax this afternoon. My thoughts are with the victim and their family." So far we're good. But then he says, "The person who did this is clearly a threat to the public and should be kept locked behind bars." And I don't want to give away my thoughts on it too much just yet, but the Premier seems to be from the very beginning coming out with, this is brutal, this person should be locked behind bars, which screams like criminality, right? That's kind of
right.
Okay, that's how I'm reading it. As I feel like Tim Houston, our Premier, maybe got his wheels turning before more information came in, because it's not going to be long before he's going to be backpedaling on that statement and probably doing something along the lines of damage control. Since we have, the beginning of the story laid out, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll hear the rest of the story come out, hear Tim Houston maybe backpedal, and eventually we're going to hear from Elliott Chorny and her mother through statements made publicly. But first, a quick break. So where we got in the story so far, we've heard the basics. There was a stabbing. A 6-year-old child was sent to the hospital with life-threatening injuries. A 19-year-old female named Elliott, we'll come back to her first name, is arrested. The Premier is saying she should be locked behind bars. The public seems to be carrying the same kind of tune. I want to read you a couple posts, because this story, it reminds me a little bit about what happened at the Walmart in Halifax with the young woman being found dead in the oven. It seems like some of the darkest, most antisocial comments you could imagine just begin to surface on social media. And that's what's happened with this case. I'm just going to read a couple random posts I saw online, and you can react to these. The first was from noted social justice warrior, someone named Josh Rushton. He says, "We put dogs down when they're not in the right head. Maybe it's time we start doing the same with humans." So at least he's suggesting that maybe it be mental health related, but
I guess I kind of think that's apples and oranges. Maybe because like humans aren't dogs, but
yeah. How
that
about
could just be me.
someone named L wrote, this was, I think, on X. So again, the perpetrator's name is Elliott Chorny. L says, it was a woman with a man's name. Enough said. Do you want to read between the lines?
Because you just know that as soon as they saw that name and
They're
then
like, yes.
Transphobes started salivating.
Yeah. And there is
It's the worst.
so much of that. There was one guy in particular I saw, this was on a Facebook post. I think it was actually the police Facebook post. This one guy responded to like every person in the comments that referred to the perpetrator as she with, it's actually a he. His name is Elliott, pretending to be a woman. Yeah, just to be clear, Elliott is a gender neutral name, and Elliott Chorny was born a female and is a female. It's just people online. Like, I feel like if Elliott had a name from somewhere else in the world, they would pile on for that reason. In this case, for whatever reason from the beginning, a lot of people began thinking it was a trans person involved in this, but it isn't. It's just
because they wanted it to be.
Maybe.
Because that's what fits their agenda of just ridiculousness. And yeah, there's a special group of people out there that just don't understand, and they clearly love to jump to conclusions.
Yeah, actually, speaking of jumping to conclusions, here's another one. This was before Elliott's name was released. Someone who uses a handle, Freedom Canuck, they wrote, import the third world, become the third world.
Like, I couldn't imagine being so confidently wrong.
Yeah, and so sure of themselves. Like, there's a lot of people who would just love to argue online, and those are the people with some of the worst opinions or hottest takes. But all this to say, the point of reading these posts isn't for you and I to virtue signal about how we thought it was a mental health issue and are empathetic and all this stuff. It is to say that, that was the kind of main discussion that was playing out. It's around that time that Elliott's mom begins to slowly reveal a bit more. She makes a Facebook post. Since she's a female, and you are as well, why don't you read it? I don't want to read the mom's words. If you have it there, this is the mom's Facebook post.
So Andrea posts, I was not going to post anything as the police warned me that social media is not a helpful place, but I feel like you all deserve to know. Yesterday, a horrific crime was committed involving a 19-year-old stabbing a 6-year-old child. The 19-year-old is my daughter, Elliott. She didn't know the child, and from what information I received, the poor child just happened to be around Elliott while she was having a psychotic break. As I can imagine, it happened very quickly and with no warning, and so the parents of the boy should not be blamed. This is a big reason why I'm making the post. In no way at all is this the fault of the child or the child's family, so stop judging and knocking the boy's support system, as they are going to need their strength to get through this. My heart goes out to the boy and his family, and I wish I could change it. As for Elliott, she is my daughter. I love her deeply, but due to her unchecked mental health, I haven't known her for a long time. She is a severely unwell person, and her father and I have been trying desperately for years to get her the help she needs. She needs treatment, and we have called police, child protective services, doctors, etc. I kept telling everyone that she was a danger if she isn't on medication, and I said I'm scared that something will happen to someone if she loses touch completely. This is the whole reason why she wasn't living at home, because I have another child that needs protection, and I felt she was too unpredictable. We didn't feel safe. Unfortunately, in Nova Scotia, you cannot force someone to take medication against their will. They can't be committed anymore, apparently, and despite trying everything, Elliott did not get the help that she needed, and the little boy has suffered needlessly despite our efforts to try and protect the community.
So a lot to unpack there. The first part of it, we haven't even mentioned this yet, is since it was a 6-year-old boy who was attacked, there was a lot of discussion online in the first day or two that this boy must have not been watched by his parents. Maybe he was like alone at the bus stop. How could this happen? How could someone not have stopped her from stabbing a boy? To that, I just say, like, do you know how quick a random person can stab another random person multiple times?
Right. Well, and people are just so confident behind their keyboard. Like, they assume, and they just, like I said, critical thinking isn't a trend here.
Mm-hmm. Like here, as in like in the year 2000 plus.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so, and I I assume because the victim was so young and innocent, maybe that's why emotions are running, in my opinion, a little higher.
Mhm.
Like, had the victim been an adult that had a hope in hell of defending themselves, there would still be outrage, but it would be different.
Yeah, it's just an attack against a 6-year-old. They're so vulnerable, so innocent, so sweet, so
Right?
defenseless.
Any person randomly attacked does not deserve it, obviously. But like, yeah, a child being involved it just makes it that much more horrible.
Yeah, it's just such a horrific display of a random attack. Like, again, I'm referencing the episodes we did about the Toronto Transit Commission. We heard a lot of stories about, like people pushing random people in front of subways and such. It was always adults. And I don't know, like, actually, I can't say I don't know. The reason why this is much more dramatic is because it's a child, and that's like a picture of innocence. So an attack on a child, it's like, we all love like every kid. We don't love every adult, and
That's correct. Yeah. That's a really good way to put it. And yeah, I'm thinking maybe that's why the pitchforks came out so quickly and aggressively too. I get it, but like, you have to stop and think.
Yeah, I think having the pitchforks out from the very beginning makes sense because it was, a child or anyone randomly attacked. People should fight to see that it doesn't happen again and question why it happened. In this case, I think the pitchforks were pointed in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
But what happens is, again, the mom comes out, makes that statement that we just read, which describes her her hopeless fight against the powers that be to get mental health treatment for her child. Maybe the pitchfork should be pointed slightly towards the province of Nova Scotia.
Right.
We'll explore that thought in this story more, but we're going to learn a lot more about Elliott Chorny's mental state. Elliott Chorny was very active online, not so much on Facebook, although she did have an account there. Where she was active was on 4chan, which is a kind of, I'll call it like an underground site where things can be a lot more extreme. Stuff that happens at 4chan would have you like blocked and banned from Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or Reddit or any of the more common social media sites. So 4chan can get pretty wild.
Anything goes.
Anything goes, absolutely. Many crimes have been traced back to 4chan, more so in the US, but there's a hell of a lot of it. But Elliott used 4chan often, and there's one thread in particular that when this surfaced, again, just like I think the day after the attack, when people started reading this, it gave you a hint of exactly how bad her mental health was, and it gives us a glimpse of what she was thinking, what she was feeling, and it maybe helps answer the question of why she did what she did at the bus stop to that 6-year-old. It doesn't give a logical explanation, but at least we hear in her own words what she was dealing with. So why don't we take a few minutes and just kind of break down what we hear and read and can learn about Elliott Chorny in this thread. First of all, before we start reading it, I know I sent you a PDF of it recently and you had a chance to read through it. What is your initial reaction reading through this? It comes across almost like a diary because it's a multi-page long thread, but it's almost exclusively her talking to herself.
My initial reaction was, this reads like somebody very mentally ill. There are points where nothing makes sense. Mm-hmm. There are points where it's like, what the hell is she talking about? Mm-hmm. Like, where is her mind going at this point?
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of that disorganized thought, but there's also like obsessive thought. She keeps repeating the same kind of themes that don't make sense. It's constantly debating self-harm and seeming to fear that she's going to hurt somebody. As we go through the thread, it's important to note that the thread we're going to be reading from is a series of posts that she made starting on the 17th of February. The attack on the 6-year-old boy was just a week later on the 25th of February. So through this thread, which again serves as a sort of diary, we're kind of following up to just days before the random near homicidal attack on the boy. The thread starts with Elliott seeking an odd kind of support by anyone who may read this. I'll read the post. I'll read her first post as it begins on the 17th of February. What Elliott writes is, "My social anxiety is unbearable. I rely on others to accompany me every time I step out into the world. My problem is that due to my anxiety, I have an incredible hard time making and maintaining friendships, and I require more assistance than ordinary friendships could offer. I'm looking for someone to meet me and either hitchhike with me or drive me someplace else and accompany me during the day. I'd like someone to walk places with me in silence for most of the day. I know this is a lot to ask, but I figure someone could benefit from mutual support. I'm also not looking to be provided with food or shelter. I have not had any success with this in the past, but here I go again." So that's how it starts, with her basically saying, I want someone to walk with me or take me somewhere.
I feel bad for her.
Well, it's, as this thread goes on, we get a glimpse into her mind, which seems to be made up of everybody is out to get her, everybody is laughing at her. She's helpless and she seems terrified to leave the house for a variety of reasons that don't make a lot of sense. And when you read this, you have to think that she's in like a laptop in a homeless shelter somewhere, because she was kind of, after being kicked out of her or being forced to leave her house, she was just bouncing from shelter to shelter. So she's going to be surrounded by other mentally unwell people, people with drug addiction, because she talks a lot about my roommates are doing crack. And, so she's this tiny little thing.
I was wondering, I was like, where is she? Because I was reading it and I was like, where is she? What's happening here? That makes sense. Yeah.
No, she's in shelters. So she's going to, her next follow-up message is going to reveal a bit more. I'll read it. "For many years, I've been closed off from the world and heavily dependent on my mother. But that changed when I became homeless and was thrown into the world on my own. I was kicked out for my anger issues, which stemmed from feeling of powerlessness over my own life. In addition to feeling trapped inside myself, I was isolated in a rural community without any transportation. I felt a complete lack of control in my life. I couldn't get a job or make friends in my community, so every day I was more and more helpless and closer to suicide. After becoming homeless, I've endured more bullying and public humiliation, which has made it harder to step out of my shell. I'm an easy target because I'm severely maladjusted. I have immense trouble with my walking. I've also had several police calls over smashing plates when attempting to eat in public, among other ailments." So that's a depressing kind of summary of one's life, living in rural Nova Scotia, being forced out of her home, is now homeless, but is feeling like she's being made fun of. But the
zero support
by the sounds of it. And the things that I want to like kind of put a tag on and highlight is what she says at the end is, I have immense trouble with my walking. We'll notice a reoccurring thread throughout her discussion here with herself, her like solo monologue or diary or whatever we want to call it, is she has it in her mind that people are making fun of her for the way she walks, bullying her for the way she walks. And it's to the point that it's like she has this crippling anxiety about it, and she doesn't want to leave her room because she doesn't want people to see her walking. And she knows that they're noticing it. So it's this kind of like, they're out to get me and they'll never accept me because of my walk. I watched videos of her walking in and out of the courtroom because she ended up, she was arrested and has since made a court appearance. And she walks completely normal. So I believe that this walking thing is in her head, but she'll talk a lot about that as we go.
She's eventually diagnosed with OCD, and that's like, people don't understand that OCD is a lot more than just checking to make sure the stove's off.
Mm-hmm.
Like and I'm no expert by any means, but I do know that it can be debilitating and obviously like take over your life.
Yeah. And in her case, OCD seems so, actually we will learn when her mother reveals more eventually, we're going to learn that she was diagnosed with OCD at a very young age. And that, like, I'm no expert, but that comes out as clear as day in reading this 4chan thread, is these obsessive thoughts. One of them is fear of her walking, or fear of other people like not liking the way she walks and judging her based on it. I'm going to read more. In talking about her need for support and wanting someone to walk with her, she says, "Where is the government when you need it? Where is my," I don't want to curse, but "where's my effing social safety net? Criminals get more support here than law-abiding citizens. Jesus Christ." So I think that is a telling note, and one that may come back. Like if there ever is like a public inquiry into this case, I think someone's going to have to talk about that.
Absolutely. I feel like I've been thinking a lot about this case over the last week, and like as a society, we've really done like a 180 and not a good 180 when it comes to mental health and, psychological institutions and just help. Because back in like the 40s and 50s, you could send your wife there just because, she didn't want to have sex with you.
She was hysterical.
She is hysterical. And it's really just like postpartum depression.
Yeah.
So you could just be like, take her, she's good, and she'd be there till she dies. And now you have to fight tooth and nail for any sort of help. And the hospital will not keep you unless you're a danger to yourself or others. And even if you are sometimes still released.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, we really went backwards there.
Yeah, and everything you said is going to completely apply to this story, because we've already said Elliott, 2 months before the attack on the 6-year-old, was charged in an assault in January. When we learn the details of that assault, it is really going to make you shake your fist at the province and our healthcare system. But Elliott's in a homeless shelter, bouncing from shelter to shelter, in this state that we're hearing her describe in this 4chan thread. As I just read there, she's saying, why isn't the government helping me? Like, criminals get better support than me. She knows she's mentally unwell, but somebody does come forward on 4chan with an offer to help Elliott Chorny. The only person that seems to be willing to help says this to her. A random person on 4chan replies and says, I'm in Nova Scotia. Can we have sex at some point? If so, I'm down. Referring to like, I'm down to go on these walks with you. Elliott responds, no, and this is why I have not found anyone to chauffeur me on walks. The random person who asked that replies, it's probably not a good idea to stick in you anyway. Good luck, you schizo.
Not surprising for 4chan. This is actually what I expect from 4chan.
Yeah, it's that's the internet in a nutshell, I guess.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, I don't even want to talk about that. That's just so dark. But in reading this thread of, again, like a solo monologue of Elliott's mental illness and discussion about self-harm, this random person's like, I'll go on these walks if I can have sex with you. And she turns him down and he tells her off and leaves. That's so the internet.
Well, at least he, let it go.
Yeah, good point. Well,
and didn't persist.
I mentioned here this idea that she had this obsession with her walking. There was one post in particular, like I just kind of want to show you and show people listening what that manifested itself like in the chat. One of the things she said in this thread is, my anxiety has me focused on my walking. I feel confined and I'm trapped in myself. I'm hyper aware of every movement I make. I just want what everyone else wants. I want to live a productive existence. I may as well kill myself. I have many regrets I could never atone for. The worst of them all is abusing my mother. But I have this walk. Without going through the whole thread, there is so much like that where it's like self-harm. My walking is an issue. I want to die. I need to die. Like, I'm going to die tonight. And a lot of her posts are saying like, tomorrow's the day, tonight's the night. But then she seems to back out of it. And then continues to talk about her walking. But the last one I'll read, the last post from this thread, this is one of the last things she writes in there. And this is on the 18th of February, so like 6 days before the attack. And this seems to suggest that the attack on a stranger was something she thought about and seemed to be trying to talk herself out of. On the 18th of February, 6 days before the attack, she says, it's all messed up. Today, my mind is set. I apologize in advance. If I live and do something awful that I have no right to do, I'm going to wish I was dead. That's how this works, because I have no right to harm someone else. Maybe I should jump off the bridge, which I believe would be the better choice. When it was a choice between that and suicide, I'll probably say I should have killed myself that day. So the way I read it, it's tough because her thought was a little all over the place, but in the context of the greater thread, she's constantly talking about different ways she could end her own life, one of which that she comes back to often is jumping off of a bridge. There's very near where this attack happened, there is a bridge, and she's in sight distance of the bridge. she threatened to jump off that bridge a lot. In fact, at one point she says, I hope it's the professor of psychiatry at Dalhousie University. That's a large university in Halifax. She names this professor and says, I hope it's, this person that peels me off of the pavement when I jump off that bridge.
That's who that is.
Yeah.
Because I read that and I was like,
I had to Google them. They're a professor of psychiatry, so maybe someone she interacted with through treatment.
Oh.
But as you're reading through the thread, it's this constant I'm going to hurt someone, I'm going to hurt myself. I'm going to hurt someone, I'm going to hurt myself. But this post in particular seems to suggest one or the other is going to happen, and she's apologizing in advance if it ends up being someone else rather than her that gets hurt. And as we know now, hindsight being what it is a week after the fact, she didn't end her own life, and she did harm someone else, a 6-year-old boy.
It's just terrible to see in hindsight someone spiraling like that,
Mm-hmm.
and then you know what ended up happening.
Yeah, absolutely. But at this point in our discussion, we've gone through a lot, but we've really only covered the first 2 or 3 days of this event, like the attack, people learning about it, her social media becoming public, the premier speaking out. But now what we're going to do, we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to hear the premier backpedal on his statement when it becomes apparent that it's involving a mental illness, which, our mental health system is something that's his responsibility. He's going to backpedal, but Elliott's mom is also going to appear on CBC and give a much better look at what Elliott was dealing with and what her family has been doing to try to get help for her. So we'll get into that after a short break. So Elliott's 4chan thread and other posts, there's a whole bunch she made, and I went through a lot of them. There's so much to be learned by reading about it, but I think what we really want to hear from as we go is her mom, who will describe Elliott ending up homeless in Halifax, and her mother can describe Elliott's lifelong interactions with mental health support that never seemed to do the trick, and especially so when Elliott became of age where she could choose to stop taking her medicine when she's 18, which we're going to hear a lot about. But first, let's hear the Premier of Nova Scotia, Tim Houston, begin to kind of pull in his previous comment when it becomes apparent that this is mental health related. So Tim Houston, after Elliott's mom, Andrea, made the post on Facebook and her chat, her 4chan communication began circulating, it was pretty clear which direction this was going to go. Here's a short clip of the news reporting on Tim Houston redirecting his prior comments. Here it comes.
Today, Premier Tim Houston addressed the incident, calling it an incredible tragedy that has touched all Nova Scotians and Canadians. Tim Houston also took some questions. One was about his social media message that said the person responsible should be locked behind bars, and that drew some criticism. Here's what he had to say today.
A person, any person who represents such a danger to others that this could happen, that person shouldn't just be walking around society.
Yes, we can all agree to that.
A slight change in words, that person shouldn't be walking around in society, is different than that person should be locked behind bars. What I've thought from the beginning is his statement initially was this person should be locked behind bars, where the statement should be this person should have been in a hospital.
Right.
See the difference?
No, absolutely. Wording is everything.
I just think it's him jumping on when the social media bandwagon was grabbing their pitchforks ready to murder the person, the evil person who did this horrible thing. I think he just jumped on that and was like, they should be, I'm going to make a strong message of putting them behind bars. But then when it's oh, wait a minute, there's way more to this. And her family says they've been trying to get support from the government for ages. And maybe that's what led to this. Then he, is redirecting it slightly.
Something else I found very funny just about, the general public's comments were, well, how she's only 19. How can she have such a long history of mental health? Do these people not think that children can't suffer mental illness? I'm confused.
Yeah, I saw a lot of that too. As we're going to hear in just a moment, this has been almost a lifelong struggle for Elliott's family. What ended up happening as the story continued to evolve and go in different directions, it was getting national, if not international, media attention. a CBC reporter, Kayla Hounsell, who is, I will say, the best reporter CBC has, maybe the best reporter Canada has. She had an interview, an in-person interview with Elliott's mom, Andrea. And I think CBC and Kayla Hounsell's work with this interview has likely redirected the public discourse in this case and is really changing the way Elliott's story is used to advocate for better mental health support. I'm going to play you just a short clip of the CBC piece. Then we'll break down just what we hear within this, because there is a lot.
Hancock says her daughter has struggled with mental illness since she was a child and is severely unwell.
On her 18th birthday, she says, I am done taking medication. I'm an adult now.
She says the situation became so unsafe for her other child, her daughter could not continue living at home, instead bouncing from shelter to shelter. A month before the alleged attack on the boy, her mother says a passerby found her on a bridge, threatening to jump.
The police took her to the hospital to get psychiatric care, and they thought she wasn't a danger to herself and others.
She says police told her it resulted in an altercation with a doctor because Chorny didn't want to be released. She was charged with assault.
I phoned them, actually. I said, you just let a very dangerous person out on the street.
In an online forum where Chorny also shared her birth certificate to confirm her identity, she posted many comments about self-harm. 5 days before the attack, she wrote, I apologize in advance if I live and do something awful.
Oh, so that answers a few questions. First of all, it answers the question related to the January 27th assault charge. When Elliott was arrested for the attack on the 6-year-old boy, one of the only things we knew is that she was charged just about 2 months prior for an unrelated assault charge. So that led to a lot of like, this is a repeat offender, you know, what's going on? Not only is this a repeat offender, but that assault charge related to seemingly an attempt at taking her own life, leading her to a hospital. The assault was that she didn't want to leave the hospital. It seems like she was fighting to be treated.
Right. And well, that's just like, it's bizarre to me that she wanted to stop her medication cold turkey, to which that's just what I got from it. I could be wrong. It's just sad that I imagine she just wanted like some kind of support, just maybe different kind of help, because I do know that some of those medications, they just turn you into a zombie. Mm-hmm. Like you don't feel anything.
Yeah.
And I mean, going off of them also isn't good. Look what happened.
Yeah.
But
in her case, though,
yeah, it's just, it's terrible all around.
Were a part of her mental struggle was obsessive thoughts. One of the thoughts, or one of the things she obsessed about, other than just her walking, as we see through that thread, is she had fears about health and environmental stuff like pollution and all this stuff. So
right.
If you had these unreasonable obsessions related to your health, I could see you being like, you know, maybe I don't need this medicine. Maybe I shouldn't take this medicine. And if you're not thinking straight, and then once you're off the medicine, like you're feeling good, so you come off it, then all of a sudden you're not feeling good, but you don't even realize what's going on. Like I think, and one other thing on that is, one of the things Elliott wrote is in that 4chan thread is that I should have got help a year ago. I should have, she keeps talking about a year ago, I should have got help. I think she's talking about when she left her home and stopped taking her medicine. I feel like she knows that she screwed up.
Oh yeah. I bet you're right. Mm-hmm. That sounds very plausible.
Some other things, I went through more statements that she made to CBC, that Elliott's mom made to CBC, just to give a sense of it. Her aggression and like tantrums and just strange behavior is traced back to about 7 years old, is when like they started seeing stuff, seeing signs of something not right. They had her on a wait list to get assessed for autism spectrum disorder, as it would have been called at the time. She was on that wait list for almost a decade before she was seen. I don't know if she was seen or if they just gave up or what the result was, but to wait 10 years seems a little laughable.
Well, like, how is the system back backed up this much.
Yeah.
Like, how are there not more resources?
Actually, as I say that, I do see she was eventually diagnosed with, like, whatever the right word is, autism or autism spectrum, being on the autism spectrum in 2023. So she waited 10 years to eventually get treated. It's awful. And in this case, when she turns 18, it was on her 18th birthday in June, was the day that she revealed to her mom, I'm going to stop taking my medicine. And people, you can't make her. She's an adult then. And that's at the point where they can make their own decisions. And I don't know the answers, but there needs to be something in society that makes it so that it doesn't get to the point that you need to attack a 6-year-old kid at a bus stop to actually involuntarily get treated. But it seems that,
Right.
and that's kind of the sad and dark irony of this, is Elliott's on 4chan wanting a chauffeur, a safe, quiet place, someone to look after her and for, to make her feel better. She was trying, and her family has been trying to get this for her through the medical system, which hasn't worked. And the irony is, after this attack on this 6-year-old, she's probably going to get the support that she needs and that her family has been asking for. And that's such a dark part about it. And that's why I'm so quick to point out and criticize the Premier's statements, because it's like, this is what it took.
And it's just so unfortunate because it was so avoidable.
Mm.
Like, this didn't have to happen. And that's, yeah, it's our mental health system could use a lot of work.
Yeah.
And I realize it's provincial, like it varies province to province, but I don't think any province really has the formula yet.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right, like there has to be some sort of involuntary like system. Yeah, I realize you can't just take someone like we used to be able to and say, take this
She's
person.
hysterical, lock her up. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, it needs to be.
You used to be able to take somebody because they were a lesbian.
That's good.
Like, but we need to find a happy medium and not just turn people away or lock people that don't need to be.
And it needs to be quick and instant, because when someone's a danger, like of course, there's so much we don't know. This January 27th event that involved her standing on a bridge, probably contemplating ending her life and being very close to it. Some passerby helps her. She ends up in a hospital. On being released from the hospital, it seems like she attacks the doctor who is treating her and is charged with assault. Yet she's still released to, seems like, a homeless shelter surrounded by other mentally ill people and drug addicted people, where she's sitting on a laptop or whatever, writing about harming someone or killing herself. That shouldn't be able to happen. There needs to be, like, it's at that point that she's leaving the hospital and the mom's calling saying, you've released a dangerous person. It's like, come on. It's at that point, something needs to be like tonight we got to bring her in. And
right. Well, and there's too many channels of people. It's out of the nurse's hands. If it's not so much the doctor's hands, but like there's so many people involved that might know she needs help, but they can't do anything.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which is even more sad.
Yeah. And one thing we haven't talked a lot about is the 6-year-old victim. We know very little about the victim. There's a publication ban against releasing identifying information. So their identity hasn't been released. They have not spoke to media. Their family has not spoke to media. We know initially that their injuries were said to be life-threatening. I think about 3 days later, a statement came out saying that they've stabilized. So I don't know much about it, but I'm expecting that means they're likely to survive.
Oh, I hope so. I know I've been thinking about him, and I'm under the mindset of no news is good news.
Yeah. We still don't, like, another thing we don't know is what even happened at the bus station. We know a bus driver witnessed it. We know a parent seemed to hold Elliott down while waiting for the police to arrive because she was arrested at the scene, but we really don't know what happened. And I have a sort of a theory, but and a bit of receipts to back it up. Is Elliott talked a lot in that 4chan thread in the week leading up to her attack about ending her life on the bridge. Where this happened was very close to a bridge that is seen as like kind of like a suicide hotspot in Nova Scotia.
Oh.
So that's one thought, is that it's just, I don't know if it's a coincidence that it happened near there, but it did. But then again, that bridge is downtown, so anywhere downtown is pretty close to that. But the bridge was in view of where this happened. And the other thing is, she talked a lot on 4chan, or wrote a lot about people laughing at her because of her walk. And she said several statements along the lines of like, if anyone laughs at me because of my walk, I'm going to attack them. She said things like that multiple times. And I can kind of see this situation in which she's having a psychotic break, walking down the street, and walks past a little kid who's just doing what little kids do and giggling and making noise. And maybe in her paranoid, confused thought, perceive that to be like, this kid's making fun of my walk, which everybody notices because it's so absurd. Which again, I will say one more time, I seen a video of her walking. It looks normal, but that's to me.
But not to her.
Not to her. I guess if you're paranoid and obsessive about these things, maybe.
Well, and wasn't she like just mercilessly bullied?
Well,
so that could stem from that too.
Well, that's said, but you hear that a lot, and I don't know what it means. I kind of would like to know more. I learned a bit about her because I met a close friend of Elliott's, and they allowed me to talk to them for a while and ask them a whole bunch of questions about her. And I asked them specifically about her walking, and what they said is like, oh, I don't know any, like, no, she didn't walk weird at all. And what they said to me is the only thing I know is, or that I could think maybe she's talking about, is that she was, had hypermobility or whatever, which is like when your joints are extra bendy. But she didn't walk weird or anything, but she could kind of like bend in unusual ways as a result of this like hypermobility. But it seems like this walking thing is just something in her head. But it also seems like she had a thing about eating, because she talked a lot about, I haven't eaten in days because I don't want anyone to see me eat. I don't want to walk down to where the food is in the shelter because people will see me walking, and I don't want them seeing me eating, so I'm just not going to eat. It's
clear that she was unwell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like to her, she saw something different than everyone else.
Yeah. And I think that the evidence that's out there already, you'll read people saying like, this is another case of someone just pleading mental illness. I think there's no question. And the route I see this case going, I'm going to say it now, and I'm sure you're going to agree with me, is the defense for Elliott, and probably in both of these charges, is going to be that she's not criminally responsible for her actions. I think any defense lawyer, that's going to be their case going in.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, and I just know that you and I are going to get, there are going to be some people that are going to be very angry with this episode and our opinions and outlooks on this. But some people just don't get it.
Before anyone has an opinion on this story, they should listen to her mother's interview, and they should read her 4chan thread, and then tell you what you think. And I'm sure the 6-year-old boy's family story is going to come out, but I bet you that story is more going to be like, we didn't even see it coming. It just all of a sudden she was on top of my son and we pulled her off. Because she's only a little thing, so it was nothing to pull her off. But it only takes a second to brutally assault someone, especially if they're not expecting it.
Absolutely. And it's so scary. And, I really think that the verdict, if you will, we can please everyone. Prisons have psychiatric wards. Okay, if we want to make everyone happy, send her to prison, put her on the psych ward. But she needs some sort of help.
But how do you do it so the kid doesn't need to get stabbed in this? How does she end up there without the kid being stabbed? And preferably without the doctor being assaulted.
It's in a perfect world, man. And it is. It's just we need more resources, and funding's a big issue. And I don't have the answer, but it's something different than what we're doing now.
Yeah, certainly. As far as updates on this case, she has a court hearing mid-March, about 2 weeks from now, which is going to be related to the January 27th assault on what's said to be a doctor or a healthcare provider. She'll be in court about that. As far as we know, when she was arrested for the attempted murder of the 6-year-old, I don't even know if we said that. She was charged with attempted murder. She was given the option for like bail or whatever the word for it would be right now, and she is said to have declined that. So it seems like she's being held right now while awaiting all of this stuff to be settled. So it seems at least now she's safe and the people around her are safe.
Good. But yeah, I can't believe bail was even offered, because she's obviously a danger to others.
It just seems like that needs to be, again, if bail was offered, it seems like it shouldn't have been. Like, where is it that they're like, whoa,
Right.
this person is dangerous and needs to be treated? Like, they should have been in a hospital and need to be in one now if they weren't already. But this is a horrible story,
Yeah.
and it's any attack against a child. It just breaks my heart. A 6-year-old, like, they're so innocent. That's a young little kid. That's like a step above a toddler, where they're just like this sweet
Yeah.
little nonsensical things. And an attack against them, whatever can allow that to happen, if there is evil in this world, which there is, it will show its face and manifest itself in attacks against things like kicking cats, attacking 6-year-olds. It's bad stuff.
Well, like, we have to think his physical wounds will hopefully heal, but like, he's probably going to have PTSD.
Can you imagine? Like, his parents are going to have to explain to him what happened, because he's a 6-year-old's not going to get it. Like, who was that? What happened? And I would love to, I shouldn't say I would love to know, but I'm very curious to know what condition they're in. They've been in, as far as I know, I've been in hospital since, but I hope they're okay and that they can get the mental support they need to heal, in addition to the healing physically. I want to thank you for joining us for this episode of Nighttime. I'm going to end this episode by wishing the best to everyone affected by this tragic story. When push comes to shove, it seems the social safety net we assume is there all too often isn't. In this case, it certainly wasn't, and an innocent child almost paid the ultimate price as a result. And that's something we should all be dusting off our figurative pitchforks for, right? Now, this is a case I intend to cover via follow-up episodes, so if anyone out there is connected to this case, I'd be very interested in speaking with you. You can reach me at nighttimepodcast.com/contact. Now, with that said, I'm going to start wrapping up this episode, but before we part, I want to end with some thanks. First, a big thanks to Madelayne for sharing another evening with me and with you, the listeners of Nighttime. A big shout out to Monty, Datta, who contributes the music for this show, and Linz from the Dystopian Simulation podcast, who provides the intro and outro voiceovers. But then lastly, and most importantly, a massive thank you goes out to each and every one of you listening to Nighttime, as without your interest and your support, this show would be as pointless as it would be impossible. Now, on the topic of support, let me thank the newest subscribers to the premium feed. Peterborough Pat, Tracy, and A Moment in Crime. We appreciate you. And for anyone else who'd like to support the show, you can do it in a variety of ways. First of all, a premium feed subscription costs just a couple dollars a month, and that money will fund the creation of new episodes. But the premium feed will also give you those episodes ad-free, 2 days early, and give you access to a back catalog of Nighttime episodes. If that sounds like something you're interested in, you can go premium right now at nighttimepodcast.com/subscribe. And even if you don't want to go premium, you can still support the show by sharing this episode on social media and letting all your like-minded friends know why they should listen. If anyone out there has story ideas, wants to give feedback on this episode, or would like to submit a question, comment, or theory to be aired and responded to in an upcoming episode, you can do all that and more at nighttimepodcast.com/contact. I look forward to hearing from you. But until then, take care of each other, hug your loved ones tight, and let me know if you see anything weird.
The Nighttime Podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Jordan Bonaparte.